there is a kind of cruelty that wears the soft face of comfort. It does not raise its voice. It does not strike. It only smiles and pours another cup of tea and tells you that the world out there is not ready for the better part of you. On a Tuesday morning in October, in a small paper mill town in northwest Ohio, a woman of 63 reached for a hardcover copy of a novel she had never finished, and a yellowed postcard slipped out from between the pages. The cursive on the reverse was still legible after 24 years. 5 words in particular shone through the brown spotting of the paper. Regretfully declines on Miss Daly's behalf. She did not remember writing those words. She did not remember anyone writing them, and yet the handwriting was as familiar to her as her own mother's voice. She held the postcard between her thumb and her forefinger. The paper was thin, the way paper grows thin only when it has been kept in a warm, closed place for a very long time. The ink had faded to a soft sepia. The corner was dog-eared, as though someone had once turned it over many times in their hand, considering, deciding, and then placing it inside a book where it would not be found until a Tuesday morning in October, in the 64th year of a quiet life. The most harmless seeming words of comfort often act like the tendrils of a cruel vine. They sustain the one who leans on them, and they grow, quietly, in directions neither could have predicted. This is the story of a friendship that lasted 40 years, and of a single sentence, kindly spoken, that had been holding a life in place the way a hand holds a small bird that wishes very much to fly. Millhaven, Ohio. Population, a number that had not changed in a decade because every birth was matched by a funeral. A paper mill smokestack rose on the north edge of town, rust-colored against a low autumn sky, and had not produced a single ream of paper since the spring of 1998. The library sat at the corner of Main and Linden Street, 2 stories of weathered red brick, with a Carnegie plaque above the door. Frances Daly had walked through that door 3 afternoons a week for 19 years, and the brass handle had taken on the warmth of her palm. She was 63 years old. She was the part-time circulation clerk. She lived alone in a clapboard house 6 blocks east of the library, in the same upstairs bedroom she had slept in since 1962, and in the small converted sewing closet at the end of the hall, in a cedar trunk that smelled of pencil shavings and church basements, she kept 6 unpublished novels, each wrapped in butcher paper and labeled by the year of its last revision. On the afternoon this story begins, she was shelving returned books and humming, very quietly, a piece of music she could not have named. A young mother had brought her toddler in to choose a picture book. The toddler had pointed at a board book about a sleepy bear and said the word bear with the rough, certain joy of a child who had only known the word for a week. Frances had smiled at the boy without meeting his mother's eye. She had been smiling like that in libraries for 19 years. She caught her reflection in the glass of the periodical rack. Silver gray bob, tortoiseshell clip, wire rim reading glasses on the brass chain her mother had given her in 1979. She looked, she thought, like every other woman she had ever shelved a book beside. And she could not decide if that comforted her or quietly broke her heart. There was a small clock above the periodical rack. It had been there since 1986. It had lost 2 minutes a week every week for 21 years, and someone every 6 months had taken it down and reset it. Frances suspected the someone was herself. She did not, in fact, remember resetting it. Some habits, she thought, do their work in the dark. They ask no permission. They simply continue, quietly, in a life that has agreed not to notice them. At 4 o'clock, she clocked out, slid her arms into a wool cardigan the color of oatmeal, and walked the 6 blocks home. The sycamores on Linden Street were dropping their leaves in slow, dignified handfuls. A neighbor's dog watched her from a porch and did not bark. Sunday evening, the kitchen of the same clapboard house, lace curtains, an oak table with one missing knot near the corner, the kettle on the stove just beginning to murmur, 2 cups, cinnamon tea, and across the table from Frances, the woman who had been her closest friend since the autumn of 1967, Sylvia Hartwell, 64, retired English teacher. A navy blazer hung over the back of her chair. Her silver hair caught back at the temple with a small tortoise comb. She poured. She smiled. She had, between them, the particular ease of a woman who had been pouring tea in this kitchen for so many decades that the kettle now seemed to recognize her hand.
There. Now sit. You have that look again. The look that says you have started the novel for the 7th time and you have not yet told me about it. Do not pretend with me, Franny. I know your shoulders. They are always 2 inches higher than usual when there is a fresh first chapter in the house.
It was the 6th time. 6th. And yes, last Tuesday, I woke at 4 in the morning and I knew, the way one knows weather, that today was a day for opening the file again. I do not know whether to be glad or embarrassed. I have a folder full of first chapters now. 6 of them. They look, when I stack them, like a small wedding cake. A wedding cake nobody asked for.
Franny, dear, I am not going to say anything you have not already said to yourself. I am only going to remind you of something I think you forget every time you open that folder. Sometimes what we need most is not a fix, but permission. You have been chasing the fix for 40 years, dear. You have polished and never given yourself permission to simply put the thing on the page and let it stand there, uncomfortable, in its first clothes.
Sylvia reached across the table and laid her hand over Frances's wrist. Her gold pendant, a single laurel leaf, caught the lamplight. The sentence sat between them in the steam of the tea. It was the kind of sentence that fits inside a heart, like a key fits into a lock that has been waiting all its life. Frances felt, in that moment, the same warm settling she had felt at 23, and at 37, and at 51. Permission. The word her mother had never given her, the word her father, in his quiet paper mill way, had not known how to give. The word that Sylvia, in 40 years of Sunday teas, had handed her like a small, soft loaf of bread. Frances would carry that sentence to bed with her that night. She would carry it upstairs, past the small trunk room, past the hardcover copy of a novel on her nightstand whose corner held, undisturbed, a yellowed postcard from 1983. She would carry it the way one carries a candle through a dark hallway, and it would not occur to her, not yet, that the candle was also what kept her from seeing the walls. The trunk room. A converted sewing closet at the end of the hall. One small window. A pull chain bulb. A cedar chest, lid scarred from 40 years of opening and closing. Inside, 6 manuscripts, each in butcher paper, each labeled in her own neat hand. 1971, 1978, 1985, 1991, 1996, 2002, 6 lives she had begun and not allowed herself to finish, 6 voices she had quieted before they grew loud enough to be heard by anyone but Sylvia. On the nightstand, beside a small lamp with a yellowed shade, sat the book. Hardcover, olive green spine, cracked, Mrs. Dalloway. She had owned it since college and had never read past page 11. The corner of a postcard barely showed between pages 42 and 43. She had forgotten it was there. She had forgotten it on purpose, the way one forgets a piece of bad news one has not yet decided how to receive. Tuesday afternoon at the library. The bell above the door rang once, twice. A tall man, lean and stooped at the shoulders, walked in with his hands in the pockets of a flannel-lined barn coat. White hair combed neatly to one side. Deep-set blue eyes. A brass pocket watch on a chain. Augustin Brockmeier, 71, retired metallurgist, widower since 2004, volunteer facilitator of the Thursday evening reading group. The kind of man who returned books a day early and refolded the dust jackets before placing them on the counter.
Frances, I read your sketch in the Heartland Voice. The one about the woman and the kitchen window in November. I read it twice, in fact. Once on Sunday morning with my coffee, and again Tuesday on the porch. I wanted to be sure I had read it right both times. And I think I did. As for the sketch, it is very pleasant. That is the word I have for it. Pleasant. I have turned it over in my mouth for 2 days now, Frances, and that is the word that stays. Pleasant. I would not say it lightly. I would not say it twice if I did not mean it both times.
Pleasant. The word landed on the counter between them like a coin dropped on a wood floor. It did not roll. It did not spin. It simply lay there, perfectly flat, perfectly polished, refusing to be anything but itself. Frances smiled and thanked him. He nodded once, slowly, and walked out into the slanting amber light of October. The bell rang behind him. She watched the door for a long moment after he had gone. Pleasant, she thought. He had said it the way one says of a casserole that the cook had not labored over. He had said it with kindness. He had said it without offering it a second time. That night, in her upstairs room, Frances opened her laptop. The cursor blinked at her, patient and indifferent, on a blank white page. She placed her fingers on the keys. She lifted them. She placed them again. She had been told for 40 years that her voice was enough. She had never asked, enough for whom? The question sat with her until well past midnight, when she finally closed the laptop without typing a single letter, and went downstairs in her slippers and stood at the kitchen window, looking at the streetlight on Linden Street. which was the only thing in Millhaven that did not need permission to be on. Late October. The first chapter, freshly typed, sat in a manila folder on Sylvia's writing desk. Sylvia's house was a craftsman bungalow on Cottonwood Lane, 4 blocks from Frances's. Her study faced east. A green-shaded banker's lamp, a red leather day planner, a fountain pen with a worn gold nib. Sylvia opened the folder with the slow ceremony of a woman who knew what her opinion would mean. She read the first paragraph aloud, softly, to the empty room. She smiled. She picked up the red pen. Every comma she changed gently. Every sentence she softened with a small note in the margin. Lovely image, just a touch quieter here. Beautiful, but perhaps Franny's reader will not need this much. She wrote in a hand so legible it almost seemed to apologize for the corrections, and on the last page, beneath the final paragraph, she wrote in a slightly larger hand, "You are growing, dear. Do not let anyone rush you." 3 nights later, Frances read the marginalia at her kitchen table. She felt her shoulders drop, the way they always did when Sylvia had read her work. She felt the small, soft warmth she had been chasing for 40 years. She felt also a thin and almost imperceptible flatness, like the taste of bread left out overnight. She did not name the flatness. She thanked Sylvia by telephone, and Sylvia laughed and told her not to be silly. November, December. The snow came early that year, Frances at the library by day, at her desk by night. Sylvia dropping by on Sunday evenings with baked apples in a covered dish, the cinnamon smell trailing her through the kitchen door. Pages reviewed, pages returned. Praise gentle and steady as a furnace pilot. The telephone in the hallway rang one Wednesday at 7. Frances let the machine pick up. Her sister's voice, brisk and unmistakable, filled the hallway.
"Franny, it is Dorothy. I am coming down the second weekend in January. If I have to drag you out of that house by your hair, you have not been to Cleveland in 6 years. 6 years, Franny. The boys ask after you at Christmas like you are someone we used to know. Call me. Or do not. I am coming either way, and do not let Sylvia answer the door for you when I get there. I want to see your face, not hers."
Frances erased the message in the morning. She told herself she would call back. She did not call back. The following Sunday, over tea, Sylvia asked after Dorothy.
Oh, Dorothy is being Dorothy. She left another one of her dramatic messages on the machine last Wednesday, threatening to drag me to Cleveland by my hair, as though I were still 17 and refusing to go to a school dance. I love her, Sylvia. You know I love her. But she has never quite understood what I do with my days. She thinks a quiet life is the same as an empty one.
Dorothy means well, dear. She always has. She just sees the world in a different key than you and I do. Some of us are built for the lake shore and the long drive. Some of us are built for the kitchen window. There is no shame in either. There is only the matter of knowing which one is yours. And you, Franny, have always known which one is yours. That is a kind of wisdom your sister has yet to forgive you for.
Spring 2008. The bell above the library door rang on a Tuesday in March. A young woman in a wool peacoat handed Frances a stack of glossy flyers and asked sweetly if the library might post one on the bulletin board near the periodicals. Frances took the top flyer. Heavy stock, cream paper, a small olive and burgundy logo in the upper left corner. The words, "The Heartland Voice," a new regional literary blog. Submissions open, edited by local writers for local readers. She did not recognize the logo. She read the editorial board names. Unquote. The third name down was Sylvia's. That Sunday over cinnamon tea, Sylvia mentioned it casually, the way one mentions a small inheritance from a distant cousin.
Oh yes, they reached out in February. A consortium up in Toledo. They wanted, real local voices. I said I would only do it if I could shape the editorial vision myself. Warmth, decency, the small American moment. The kind of writing that does not perform for anyone. The kind of writing, dear, that sounds like us on a Sunday evening. And I had thought, perhaps, that you might be one of our first contributors. If you would do me that kindness. You begin by signing this, Franny. It is 2 pages. Standard. Boilerplate. I have already filled in your name. Use my pen.
Sylvia, that is generous of you. I do not know what to say. I have not published a word in 19 years. I would not know where to begin. But if you tell me to begin here, on this oak table, with your fountain pen and your trust, then I begin here. Of course, where else would I begin?
She slid a contributor agreement across the oak table. 2 pages. She offered her own fountain pen. Frances skimmed the paragraphs. She was a careful reader of novels and a poor reader of contracts. She did not, in fact, read the 3rd clause on the 2nd page. She signed at the bottom. Sylvia clapped her hands together once, softly, like a teacher who had just received a perfect recitation. Her first sketch ran on the Heartland Voice in April 2008. 800 words, about a woman who repotted a Christmas cactus in February. It was praised on the comment thread by 3 readers Frances had never met. Sylvia called it luminous. Her second sketch ran in May. A woman, a porch swing, a late thunderstorm. Sylvia called it her tenderest piece yet. Her third ran in June. A widower, a kitchen radio, a forgotten cup of coffee. Quietly devastating, Sylvia wrote in the headnote, the voice of a small American afternoon. Thursday evening reading group, folding chairs in a semicircle in the library basement. 8 regulars, a plate of store-bought butter cookies. Frances read aloud from her July sketch. A woman, a screen door, a child's bicycle on a lawn. The group applauded politely. Frances sat down. Auggie, in the back row, cleared his throat once. He raised his hand the way he always did. Slowly, as though the air were a thing he did not wish to disturb.
Frances, forgive me. Your sketch this month. It sounded a great deal like your sketch last month, and the one before that. I would not say so if I did not think you knew it. The trouble, you see, is that last June, a year ago, last June, you did not. Last June, you wrote a paragraph about a woman cleaning a shotgun in a basement that I have not been able to forget. I read it twice, and I did not sleep that night. And I have been waiting, Frances, for that paragraph to come back.
A small ripple ran through the folding chairs. One woman coughed. Another woman looked down at her shoes. Frances laughed, quickly, the way one laughs at a remark made in a crowded room, and said something light about the danger of having a voice, of sounding like oneself. Auggie did not laugh back. He folded his hands in his lap and looked, very kindly, at the floor between his shoes. The room did not laugh. The room did not move. On the drive home, Frances told herself that Auggie had always been a difficult reader. She told herself that he was lonely since his wife. She told herself the things she needed to tell herself in order to sleep. The flatness she had not named the previous October sat down beside her on the passenger seat and did not buckle in. She passed the paper mill on the way home. The smokestack rose against a low, pale moon. She had passed it 10,000 times in her life. Tonight, somehow differently. She thought of the men and women who had worked inside it, year after year, until the day in 1998, when a man in a gray suit had come down from a corporate office in Cincinnati and explained, very politely, that the work was no longer profitable. The men had walked out. Their voices had not been needed anymore. She wondered, briefly, what it cost a town to keep being told, year after year, that its voice was no longer needed. She wondered whether one could be a paper mill and not know it. 18 months later. Autumn 2009. The library on a Wednesday afternoon. Frances at the staff laptop in the back office, a stack of paper printouts beside her. She had pulled, for reasons she would not have been able to explain aloud, the complete archive of her own contributions to the Heartland Voice. 18 months. 23 published flash sketches. She began to read them, in order, in a quiet, flat voice that was not quite hers. A woman repotted a Christmas cactus. A widower forgot a cup of coffee. A child's bicycle lay on a lawn. A grandmother folded a tablecloth. A neighbor returned a borrowed casserole dish. A young couple walked home from a movie in the rain. Each one ended on the same long, gentle, half-resigned chord. Each one stopped just short of saying the difficult thing. Each one offered, instead, a window, a sigh, an almost sentence that turned, at the last moment, toward warmth. Every piece was variations on the same theme, and the theme, she realized with a slow tightening in her stomach, was not her own. She read for an hour and a half. She did not eat lunch. She did not answer the phone when it rang on her desk. She read until the words began to soften and dissolve, the way ink dissolves in standing water, and she understood at last that she had been listening to a single voice for 18 months, and that the voice was not hers, but a version of hers that had been pressed gently through a fine cheesecloth until nothing rough was left. It was the most polite horror she had ever felt. She stood up. She walked to the small kitchenette at the back of the staff office. She poured herself a cup of stale breakroom coffee. She drank it standing at the counter. She did not taste it. She returned to the laptop. She read 3 more sketches. She closed the laptop. She gathered the printouts into a single uneven stack and slid them into the bottom of her tote bag, beneath her moleskin and her cardigan, where she would not have to see them when she lifted the bag to her shoulder. and yet she could feel them there, the way a person can feel a small unhealed bruise beneath the sleeve. Friday evening. Frances pulled into her driveway in the slate blue light of November dusk and found a duffel bag on her front porch and a woman in a flannel shirt sitting beside it, eating an apple. The porch light had not yet come on. The woman did not look up when the headlight swept her face. She took another bite of the apple. She chewed it. She swallowed.
You did not call. I told you in January. I told you in May. I told you again last month. You did not call. So here I am. I drove 3 hours and 40 minutes through wet leaves and a deer on the median outside Sandusky, and I am sitting on your porch with an apple and a bag, and I do not intend to be polite about it. Get in the car, Franny. One weekend, just one. We go to Cleveland. We walk the lake shore. We come home Sunday.
Dorothy, I am tired. I have had a long week. I have a reading to prepare for in November. I have a great many things I cannot leave right now. You should have called. I would have told you the same thing on the phone, and you would not have wasted the gas.
I have had a long decade, Franny. I have had a long decade and a buried husband and a sister who answers her telephone like a woman pretending to be out. You can come, or you can refuse. There is a difference between can and will. And you have been not willing for so long that I do not know which of you is even left in there. I am tired of talking to the answering machine. Open the door. I will sleep on the couch. I will sleep on the floor. I will sleep in the car if you make me. I am not driving back tonight.
Frances stood on her own porch and felt the porch light come on automatically above her head. She felt the sister who had buried her own husband 11 months earlier looking up at her with the patience of a woman who had seen worse things than refusal. She felt, somewhere inside her chest, a small and unfamiliar urge to laugh. She did not laugh. She unlocked her door. She told Dorothy, very quietly, to come inside, that she would make tea. Dorothy answered, just as quietly, that she did not want tea. She wanted her sister. They went inside. Frances put the kettle on, anyway. Later that night, after Dorothy had gone upstairs to the spare room, Frances sat at her kitchen table with her laptop and the manila contributor agreement she had signed 18 months earlier, dug out of a drawer she rarely opened. She read page 1. She read page 2. She read the third clause on the second page. By signing below, the contributor grants the editor-in-chief of the Heartland Voice first right of refusal on any outside fiction or non-fiction submission made by the contributor for the period of this agreement, in order to coordinate the publication calendar and protect the contributor from competing claims. She read it again. She read it a third time. The clause was so politely worded it almost seemed to be apologizing for existing. First right of refusal. She did not know exactly what that meant in publishing. She did not need to. The English of it was clear enough. Sylvia had been seeing everything first for 18 months, and Frances had signed her name to that arrangement in March of 2008 on a Sunday evening, over a teacup of cinnamon tea on the same oak table where she was now sitting. She did not move. She heard the kettle, which she had forgotten to take off the burner, begin to whistle. She heard it whistle once. She heard it whistle twice. She heard it whistle a third time. She did not stand. She did not reach for the handle. She listened to a sound she had heard 10,000 times in her own kitchen and could not, in that long suspended moment, remember what she was supposed to do about it. She thought of Sylvia's fountain pen lying across the contributor agreement on the table in March of 2008. She thought of how she had not, in fact, asked a single question. She thought of the small, soft warmth she had felt when she had signed her name. She thought of how she had been signing her name to that same warm, soft thing for 40 years, in 40 different forms, on 40 different evenings, and how none of them had ever felt, in the moment, like a door being closed. From upstairs, she heard Dorothy turn over in the spare bed. The bed springs made a small protesting sound. The kettle whistled a fourth time. Frances rose slowly, like a woman much older than 63, and walked to the stove, and lifted the kettle off the burner, and set it on the cold back ring. The whistle died. The kitchen was, once again, exactly the kitchen it had always been. And exactly not. The kettle whistled itself dry. Frances did not move. The Heartland Voice annual critique evening was held every November in the second-floor reading room of the old Carnegie Library. Dark wood paneling, a long oval table. 28 chairs arranged in 2 rows behind the readers. A lectern at the front with a small brass reading lamp. Frances had been invited to read for the 3rd year in a row. She had spent the week revising the piece she intended to read. 6 drafts, then a 7th, then an 8th, each one a little quieter than the last. Each one, she would realize later, a little more like the voice the Heartland Voice had taught her to use. On the afternoon of the reading, Dorothy stayed home. She said she had a headache. She did not, in fact, have a headache. She had decided over breakfast that morning that she would spend the afternoon in the small trunk room at the end of the upstairs hall. She had not been allowed in that room since 1979. She intended to enter it anyway. Frances drove to the Carnegie at 6. Dorothy waited until she heard the car turn the corner. Then she climbed the stairs. The trunk room. The cedar chest closed and dusty. The lamp with the yellowed shade. The hardcover of Mrs. Dalloway on the nightstand. Dorothy stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at the room the way one looks at a small private chapel. She did not open the trunk. She did not feel that she had a right to. She did, however, lift the copy of Mrs. Dalloway from the nightstand to dust beneath it. The book slipped from her hand. It struck the corner of the nightstand and fell open on the rug. A yellowed postcard slid from between pages 42 and 43 and landed face up on the braided rug. Dorothy bent and picked it up. The penmanship was elegant, slightly forward slanted, with a small flourish on the lowercase d. The date in the corner read, May 14, 1983. The address was a post office box in Iowa City. Dear Director, Dorothy read silently, we have received your kind letter of acceptance regarding Miss Frances Daly's enrollment in the Summer Fiction Conference. With great regret, I must inform you, on her behalf, that Miss Daly has decided to remain close to home this summer in order to care for an ailing relative. She is naturally deeply grateful for the opportunity. With warmest regards, S.H. Puller. Dorothy stood very still in the small upstairs room. She read the postcard a second time. She read it a third. Her face did not move. She had been a pediatric nurse for 34 years. She had told mothers their children were going to live, and she had told mothers their children were not. She had a face for this kind of news. She knew her sister's handwriting. She knew Sylvia's. She had not seen Sylvia's penmanship since a Christmas card in 1991, but the slope of the lowercase d was unmistakable. She slid the postcard into the inside pocket of her flannel shirt. She put the copy of Mrs. Dalloway back on the nightstand. She walked downstairs. She lifted her coat from the hook by the kitchen door. She picked up the car keys from the bowl on the side table, and she drove in the slate blue November dusk to the Carnegie Library. Inside the second-floor reading room, the lights were warm and low. 26 of the 28 chairs were filled. Sylvia, in a navy blazer over a cream silk blouse, sat in the front row. Her gold laurel pendant caught the lamplight when she turned her head. Auggie Brockmeier sat in the very last row, his pocket watch chain visible against the dark wool of his vest. Frances stepped to the lectern. She set down her pages. She adjusted the small brass reading lamp. She lifted her eyes to the room and found, with a small lurch of relief, Sylvia's encouraging nod. She read for 9 minutes. A woman, a kitchen, a forgotten letter, a window opening onto a small American afternoon. The audience listened with the attentive politeness of people who had been told beforehand exactly how to listen. When she finished, the applause was warm and measured, exactly the right length, exactly the right volume. Sylvia rose. She walked to the lectern. She placed one hand on Frances's shoulder, lightly, the way a benefactor places a hand on a beloved protégé. She turned to the room.
What we love about Frances, what we have always loved about Frances, is her natural, authentic voice. The voice of a small American afternoon. The voice of a woman who knows what is enough. We are fortunate, all of us, to live in a town where a voice like this can still be heard above the noise of the louder world. Some writers chase. Some writers shout. Frances listens, and then she sets down, on the page, exactly what she has heard. No more, no less. That, friends, is the rarest gift in American letters.
The audience nodded. 2 women in the third row clasped hands. A man in the second row dabbed his eye with a handkerchief. Frances felt her shoulders drop, the way they always did, when Sylvia had read her work. And then, from the last row, a quiet hand went up.
Frances, I have a question for our reader, if our editor will permit it. I have only one. Frances, may I ask, when did you last write a sentence that Sylvia had not seen first? Not the polished sentence, not the published sentence. The first sentence, the one that came up out of the dark of you. When did you last write one of those and let it stand and send it out into the world without first sliding it under a door on Cottonwood Lane?
The room did not breathe. The man in the second row lowered his handkerchief. The 2 women in the third row let go of each other's hands. Sylvia's polite smile did not falter, but something behind her eyes moved. very slightly, the way a curtain moves when someone has just stepped away from the window. Frances opened her mouth. She closed it. She tried to count, in her own head, the sentences she had written in 18 months that Sylvia had not seen first. She could not count any. She tried to count the sentences she had written in 5 years. She could not count any. She tried to count the sentences in 20 years. She heard the door at the back of the reading room open. Dorothy walked up the center aisle in her flannel shirt and her scuffed leather boots and her plain bobby pin. She did not look at Sylvia. She did not look at Auggie. She walked the length of the room with the steady, unornamented pace of a woman who has been to too many bedsides to fear a small one. She climbed the 2 steps to the lectern. She placed a yellowed postcard, face up, beside Frances's pages. She stepped back. She did not speak. Frances looked down. The cursive caught the lamplight. Dear Director, May 14, 1983. With great regret, I must inform you on her behalf that Miss Daly has decided to remain close to home this summer. She did not need to read further. She knew the handwriting. She had known it her whole adult life. She lifted her eyes, slowly, from the postcard and found Sylvia's face. Sylvia's face flickered, not with shame, not with denial, not even exactly with surprise. It flickered the way the face of a person flickers when, after 40 years of holding a small private door closed, they finally feel the handle turn from the other side, and then it steadied into the smile of a woman who had rehearsed this moment very quietly every Sunday evening over cinnamon tea for 4 decades. Who had imagined the room? Who had imagined the postcard? Who had imagined her own face? And who had decided, long ago, how she would answer when the day finally came?
I only ever wanted you to stay. The world out there. Franny, it would have eaten you. They were not ready for you. I knew it in 1983, and I know it now. You are not a woman who survives Iowa City in July. You are not a woman who survives a New York rejection slip in your own mailbox. You are a woman who survives a kitchen, a kettle, a Sunday evening. I knew that the first afternoon I met you in 1967, and I have been protecting that woman ever since.
Sylvia, there were others, were there not? Other letters, other replies, other doors. Tell me, now, with 26 strangers in this room, tell me how many.
2. In 1991. 1 in 1998. The replies came to my post office box, dear. I forwarded the polite ones to you. The others, I did not think you needed to see. Franny, I read them first. I read every word. The ones that said yes, and the ones that said almost. I read them sitting at my own kitchen table, and I asked myself very honestly whether the woman I loved would survive what those letters would ask of her. And every time, dear, every time I decided the kinder thing. The kinder thing was to keep you here, to keep you whole, to keep you mine.
Frances heard a sound very far away. She realized, after a moment, that it was her own breath. She realized, after another moment, that she had not been breathing for some time. She looked at the postcard. She looked at Sylvia. She looked at her sister Dorothy, standing in the front row with her arms folded across her flannel shirt, her face as still as winter water. She did not raise her voice. She did not weep. She did not, in that moment, feel anger. She felt instead a slow and almost geological recognition, the kind one feels standing at the edge of a canyon and understanding that the wind has been at work, quietly, for longer than one's whole family line.
You loved me. I do not doubt that. I will not doubt that even now, standing in this room, with this postcard between us. You loved me, and you kept me, and you told yourself every Sunday evening that the two were the same thing. Sylvia, listen to me. They are not. You kept me safe. Yes. You kept me whole. Yes. And you kept me small. You kept me small enough to fit in your kitchen. You kept me small enough to fit in your blog. You kept me small enough to fit, finally, in your own loneliness. And the worst of it, Sylvia, is that I let you.
Sylvia's eyes did not waver. She did not deny it. She did not, in that moment, even seem to wish to deny it. She had loved Frances. She had loved Frances exactly as Frances was, and she had loved her also the way a gardener loves a small tree planted against a wall, who waters it carefully and prunes it carefully and tells herself, year after year, that the tree wants to be against the wall, because the gardener has come to need the shape of the tree against the wall in the way she has come to need her own kitchen window.
I did not know I was doing it for a long time. And then I knew. And I told myself it was love. And I think, Franny, for a while it was. And then for a longer while, it was both. And I could not, after a certain year I will not name, tell them apart anymore. And I stopped trying because the trying frightened me more than the doing. There is your answer. Take it home with you. It is the only honest thing I have ever given you.
Frances felt the room around her, and the lectern under her palms, and the polite breathing of 26 strangers, and she felt no particular need to answer. Some answers, she understood, are not given in rooms. Some answers are given in kitchens, much later alone, into the steam of a cup of cinnamon tea that has gone cold. Some answers are given by walking out. The cello rose, somewhere in the dark behind the reading. The strings rose under it. The warm chord that had played in some form in Frances's kitchen for 40 years of Sunday evenings swelled now into a different key. The same notes, a different sky. Frances picked up the postcard. She picked up her pages. She walked off the lectern. She walked past Sylvia, who did not reach for her arm. She walked past Auggie, who lowered his eyes the way a man lowers his eyes when he has done a thing that needed doing and does not need to be thanked for it. She walked the length of the center aisle, and Dorothy fell in step behind her, and the two sisters walked out of the second-floor reading room of the old Carnegie Library into the slate-blue November night. Behind them, the room did not applaud. The room did not speak. The brass reading lamp on the lectern threw a small warm circle of light onto nothing at all. Late that night, the kitchen of the clapboard house. The cinnamon tea had gone cold in its pot. The lace curtains hung still. The oak table with the one missing knot held in its center. The yellowed postcard, face up under the lamp. Dorothy had taken herself to bed without a word, in the way of a woman who knew when grief needed witnesses and when it needed only walls. Upstairs, in the spare room, the bedside light had clicked off 30 minutes earlier. The house was as quiet as Frances had ever known it. Frances sat at the table in her oatmeal cardigan and her sage-colored slacks. Her hands were folded in her lap, the way her mother had taught her to fold them at church. She looked at the postcard. She looked at her own hands. She looked for a long moment at the small, steady flame of the lamp. She spoke, then into the empty kitchen, slowly. Each word weighed and set down.
Sometimes, what we need most is not a fix, but permission. Sometimes, what we need most is not a fix, but permission. I have heard you say those words, Sylvia, 10,000 times. I have heard them in your voice every Sunday for 40 years. I have never, until this moment, heard them in mine.
She heard the words in her own voice. She had heard them in Sylvia's voice 10,000 times. She had never heard them in her own. They were different in her own mouth. They were not a benediction. They were not a key turning in a lock from the outside. They were something she had been waiting her whole life to say to herself. Permission, she understood now, was not something that could be granted. It was not a small, soft loaf handed across an oak table. It was not the warm hand on the shoulder. It was a thing one took quietly in one's own kitchen at 63 years old, in a clapboard house 6 blocks east of a library she had walked into for 19 years. Her hand reached, unbidden, for the fountain pen clipped to the strap of her navy canvas tote, which hung on the kitchen chair. She did not look at her hand. She let it do what it had been waiting 40 years to do. She climbed the stairs. She passed the spare room. She passed her own bedroom. She entered the small trunk room at the end of the hall and stood inside it without apologizing to it. She did not burn the manuscripts. She had imagined, once or twice in her life, that this scene would involve a fire. It did not. She lifted the cedar lid. She knelt on the braided rug. She found by feel the butcher paper bundle labeled 1991. The one Sylvia had read in the autumn of that year and returned with a small, sad smile, saying only, "Too raw to share yet, Franny. Too raw." Frances unwrapped the butcher paper. The pages were yellowed at the edges, but the typewriter ink was clear. She read the first paragraph. It was rough. The rhythm stumbled. A modifier hung awkwardly off a sentence. There was a comma where there should have been a period, and a period where there should have been a question mark. It was the most alive sentence she had read all year. She carried the manuscript to her desk. She set it beside the laptop. She did not retype it. She opened a fresh page and began to type over it, sentence by sentence, leaving every rough rhythm in, leaving the modifier where it hung, leaving the comma where it leaned. She wrote until the small upstairs window grew faintly gray with the first hint of morning. Downstairs in the kitchen, the cold cinnamon tea sat in its pot, and the yellowed postcard sat face up on the oak table, and neither of them, Frances would later think, had any further power over her at all. A weekend in Cleveland, 2 weeks later. Dorothy had insisted again. This time Frances had said yes before her sister had finished the sentence. Lake Erie in November, under a sky the color of a dove's wing. The two women walked the shoreline path north of Edgewater Park. The wind off the water was cold and clean. Leaves crunched beneath their shoes. A freighter sat on the far horizon, motionless, the way freighters always seem to sit when one is looking at them, and never when one is looking away. Dorothy walked with her hands in the pockets of her wool coat. Frances walked with her hands clasped behind her back, the way she had walked as a girl. For a long time neither of them spoke. The gulls did the speaking for them.
Took you long enough, Franny. I have been waiting on this walk since 1979. Since the summer you came home from college and told me you had decided not to go to that workshop in Vermont because Sylvia thought the timing was wrong. I was 16. I did not know how to say it then. I do not know how to say it now. I am only glad you are here, that is all. I am glad you are here. Do not make me say anything else, or I will cry on this lakeshore, and I have not cried on a lakeshore since 1981. You know what I remember most, Franny? The Christmas of 1982. You were home for 3 days. You sat at Mama's kitchen table on the second night, and you read a paragraph aloud to me about a woman walking a frozen field. I was 19. I did not understand half of it, but I understood that the woman in your paragraph was not afraid of the field. And I thought, my sister has written a sentence that is braver than she is. And then January came, and you went back to Millhaven, and I did not hear another paragraph for 27 years. I waited. I kept waiting. I told myself you were busy. I told myself it was not my place. I was wrong about the second one, Franny. It was my place. I should have driven down sooner. I should have driven down in 1985. I should have driven down in 1991. I am sorry I did not. There. I have said it. Now you say something light, or I will lose my composure on this gravel path.
It was the first laugh Frances had laughed in 7 weeks. Dorothy did not turn to look at her. Dorothy, who had known her sister since 1949, kept walking because she understood that some laughs are easier to laugh in profile. The evening before she carried the manila envelope to the post office, Frances stayed late at the library to straighten the periodicals and lock the back door. The reading lamps had already been switched off. The bell above the front door rang once, softly, as she was tucking a worn paperback back onto its shelf.
Forgive the hour, Frances. I saw your light through the window from across Linden Street, and I thought perhaps you would not mind a moment. I have been carrying a thing in my head for 2 weeks now, and it has begun to feel impolite not to set it down. The piece you read at the critique evening. I did not say so that night. The room had other business, but what you read after the postcard arrived on the lectern, the way your voice moved after. I have been a reader of the small American sentence for 50 years, and I have not heard one find itself in a single evening the way yours did. I am not telling you to do anything with that. I am only telling you plainly what I heard.
Auggie, I have a chapter on my kitchen table, 52 pages. I have been carrying it around for a week now, in a manila envelope with a Chicago address written on it. I have not been able to decide whether I am the person who mails it. I do not know even now if I am, but I know, after what you have just said, that I will not sleep tonight if I do not put it in the slot tomorrow morning. So, thank you for not waiting until I asked.
Auggie nodded once, the way he had nodded at the counter 3 Octobers earlier, and stepped back into the cold. The bell rang once more behind him. Frances stood for a long moment beside the periodical rack, the worn paperback still in her hand, and she understood, with a small, clean lift in her chest, that the decision had already made itself somewhere upstairs, days ago, without consulting her. January 2010. The small post office on Linden Street, 2 blocks from the library. A manila envelope on the counter. Inside, a single chapter, 52 pages, typed clean, no covering letter beyond the standard formalities. Addressed to the Walnut and Pier Quarterly, Chicago, Illinois. Frances did not show the chapter to Sylvia. She did not show it to Dorothy. She did not, in fact, keep a copy. The postal clerk weighed the envelope, stamped it, and slid it across the counter into a gray canvas bin. Frances paid in cash. She walked out into the cold January light. The bell above the post office door rang once behind her. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel afraid. She felt instead the unfamiliar lightness of a person who had, for the first time in her life, mailed a sentence into the world without first asking anyone whether the sentence had permission to go. On the walk home, she passed the library. The brass handle she had warmed with her palm for 19 years caught the cold sun. She did not go in. She walked past her own clapboard house. She walked all the way to the edge of town, where the road curved past the rusted paper mill smokestack, and she stood there for a long minute, looking up at the iron sky and the brick chimney that had not produced a single ream of paper since 1998. She thought, perhaps freshly, that a town could close its mill and still keep, somewhere inside it, the voices of the men and women who had once worked there. She thought a voice did not need a chimney, it only needed someone willing to listen to it. She turned and she walked home. 6 weeks passed. February melted into early March. The dogwood on the corner of Linden Street put out its first cautious buds. Frances continued to work 3 afternoons a week at the library. She continued to shelve returned books. She continued also to write at night, in her upstairs room on a manuscript she did not show to anyone, in a voice that did not stumble anymore because she had stopped trying to make it stop. Sylvia had stopped coming on Sunday evenings. The cinnamon tin in Frances's cupboard sat unopened. They had not spoken since the night of the critique. They did not, Frances suspected, need to. And then, on a Thursday afternoon in mid-March, Frances came home from the library to find the small red light on her answering machine blinking. She set down her tote. She set down her keys. She walked to the side table by the hallway. She pressed the play button.
Mrs. Daly, this is Hollis Marine at the Walnut and Pier Quarterly in Chicago. I am calling about the chapter you sent us in January, the one about the woman in the trunk room. We would like to publish it. It is not finished. We can both see that. But it is true, and that, in our experience, is the harder thing. Please call me back at your convenience. I would like very much to speak with you. And Miss Daly, whoever told you for however long that this voice was not ready, was not telling you the truth. Whoever told you for however long that the world out there could not hold this voice, was not telling you the truth either. Call me. The number is on the letterhead. I will be at this desk until 7 tonight, Chicago time. And I will be at this desk again at 8 in the morning. I look forward to your call.
The machine clicked off. The red light stopped blinking. The hallway was very quiet. Frances slid slowly down the wall of her own hallway until she was sitting on the cold linoleum floor of her own kitchen, her cardigan bunched around her, her tote slumped beside her, her reading glasses askew on their brass chain. She laughed. The laugh became something else. The something else became a small, steady weeping. The weeping became, after a while, a laugh again, both at once. She did not try to choose. She sat on the linoleum floor for a long time. The afternoon light moved across the kitchen wall. The vine shadows of the lace curtains shifted with it, slowly, the way they had shifted across every afternoon of her life. And on this particular afternoon, she did not, when she looked at them, see a cage. She saw a window. April of that year, the dogwoods on Main Street were in full bloom. Frances was crossing from the library to the small bakery on the corner when she saw, half a block ahead, a familiar navy coat, silver hair in a sharp chin-length cut, a red leather day planner under one arm. Sylvia. Sylvia saw her at the same moment. The two women did not slow. They did not stop. They did not exactly look away. They met each other's eyes for the length of a single breath, and they nodded, each of them, the small, unhurried nod of two women who had known each other for 40 years and would not know each other for the next 40. Then they passed each other, Sylvia walking east, Frances walking west. Neither of them turned to look. The white dogwood petals drifted between them and settled, in scattered handfuls, on the warm spring sidewalk. The vine, Frances thought as she walked on, had not been ripped out of the ground. It had only been, very quietly, cut. Neither of them was destroyed by it, only released. She went home that evening and made cinnamon tea for the first time since November. She drank it alone at the oak table with the one missing knot. She did not feel lonely. She had spent 40 years feeling lonely in company. She was learning, at 63, what it felt like to be company to herself. Months later, in the small upstairs room, Frances sat at her desk in the light of a single window. Her laptop was open. A half-filled page glowed on the screen. The cedar trunk stood in the corner, its lid propped against the wall, its butcher paper bundles thinned by 3. A copy of Mrs. Dalloway sat on the nightstand. She had finally read it through. It had taken her 3 weeks. She had loved it. She typed a sentence. She paused. She typed another. She did not look behind her. She did not pick up the phone. She did not, for the first time in her writing life, see a small, approving face in the corner of the room. She had spent 40 years asking for permission. The day she stopped asking, the sentence she had been waiting to write simply arrived. It was rougher than she had imagined. It was truer than she had hoped. It was hers. Outside, on the porch of her clapboard house, the porch light came on automatically at dusk. The way it had come on every evening for 19 years. The amber light fell on the dogwoods. It fell on the empty sidewalk. It fell on no one in particular, and on every woman in every small town in America who had ever been told, kindly, that her voice was enough, and who had not yet thought to ask the next question. Sometimes, the cruelest thing a friend can do is love us exactly as we are. Sometimes, the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is to walk, very quietly, out of the room we have been loved in. Frances Daly was 63 years old. She had written one true sentence. She had not first asked permission to write. She would write, before she was finished, several thousand more. And on the oak kitchen table downstairs, in the slow amber light of a small American afternoon, the yellowed postcard sat in a drawer she no longer opened. She had not thrown it away. She did not need to. It had done its work. The vine was cut, the window was open, and the sentence, at long last, had arrived.